Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Just some quick programming notes to start. Next week is Christmas Day and New Year's Day, respectively, both Sundays. And as you know, I drop new episodes on Sundays, but in celebration of the holidays, I do celebrate Christmas. It's a busy time for me, for you as well. I will not be dropping an episode for the next 2 weeks. As I said, it's Christmas Day and then New Year's Day. So our next new episode will be in 2023 on January the 8th. So we'll see you then with some new material. Looking forward to that. And I will say this, if you're traveling during the holidays, the Chess Angle is a great binge. Maybe this is the first episode you're hearing. Maybe you just discovered us. Check us out. If you're waiting at the airport, the flight's delayed, pop in the earbuds, catch up on episodes you missed. You're in traffic in the car, hook up the Bluetooth. It's a great binge. So let us accompany you on your holiday travels. We'll make it as stress-free as possible. All right. So I'll remind everybody at the end. So once again, no new episode until January the 8th. My guest this week is a good friend of mine, National Master Robert Guevara, a fellow educator, has a background in teaching history, excellent chess player. We've had a lot of great conversations at the club about chess, and so I wanted to invite Rob on the podcast just to get his insight into the game and share some improvement tips and some great stories I believe he's going to tell us as well. So Rob, good to see you, and welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks, Neil. It's a really good honor to be here because I've heard a lot of good things about this podcast, and it's my first podcast as far as chess, and it's great. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Glad to have you on. So Merry Christmas to you, Rob.
To you too.
Thank you. I want to start with this question. You didn't start playing in tournaments until you were about 25. Which is interesting because in chess, that's considered like late, like quote unquote late, because you hear a lot of grandmasters and titled players, they're starting when they're like 6, 7 years old, sometimes younger. And you started at 25 and you had a pretty decent rating fairly quickly. So I was hoping you could just give us some background on what that was like starting tournaments at that age and how you did and how that all worked out.
Oh, definitely. It's funny because if I had waited much longer, I think I would have gotten my first wheelchair or cane, walk-in cane, before I actually played in my first tournament or, bought my first chess book. But I started on September 11th, 1995 was my very first tournament. I just turned 25 after college. Even though my dad had taught my brother, my sister, the rules of chess, we never really played as kids. We really didn't know. There weren't clubs around. We didn't know much. But somehow I was fascinated by it because as my sister learned and liked reading a lot, my brother liked music and art, and they were good at it. I didn't really have something where I said, oh, I'm really attracted to this or interested. So as far as hobbies, sports is one of the things, but definitely something about chess was different. And so after college, there was a situation where I was not teaching history yet. And it turned out I was kind of bored. I didn't want to just sit home after work and watch TV the rest of the night and go back to work. I wanted something that was more interactive. And it turned out I went to the local library and there was a chess club there. And I was amazed. I was like seeing some older gentlemen playing. And I looked at them. Even some had clocks and they were serious and quiet. And I said, this is very interesting. I'm going to show up. So I showed up several weeks. And then someone else came and said, well, there's another club where you can, talk about the games, analyze, and then eventually, play in tournaments if you like. And so at that point, I was, I would say, extremely hooked on the chess society, small little society where you get to meet people and talk with them and then play serious games. And and that's when I started competing. And I had studied a little bit before my very first tournament. My dad had gotten me a chess book when I was, a little teenager maybe, and I didn't read it or anything. But then I said, "Oh, I have a chess book. Let me read it." And then that's what I used to, I guess, start playing. And since then I've played hundreds of tournaments over the years, and just always enjoyed the beauty of the game, and always enjoyed meeting people, friends, making lifelong friends like yourself, people that really, I think, are very thoughtful. And and so that's really, in short, my background. Again, I didn't expect to play chess at all. When I graduated from college, I had other ideas, but it just seemed to fall in my lap. And I don't regret the fact that wasn't exposed to it early. Maybe I wouldn't have done as well in my studies. Maybe I would have been just a different person. It is what it is. And but I was really glad. I've always been very glad that I got into it.
No, I agree. It happens when it happens, because I hear some people, oh, I wish I had started when I was, we all think that. But then it's like, all right, get over it. That's just, that's how it is. It worked out. It's circumstances. But like you said, once the bug bites you, you're pretty much into it. Now, Rob, can you talk a little bit about how you made Master? Was that something, I mean, I know it didn't happen overnight, but was it something, did you make like a big rating jump all of a sudden? Was it more gradual? Was there a certain inflection point? Was there something specific that you studied or did? I was just hoping you could kind of walk us through maybe, I guess, when you were around 15, 16, 1700, how did you make the jump from that to 2200? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story because everyone has their own story, and as far as learning, and improving, or getting stuck, as they say, plateauing. And so my story was that I just enjoyed to play. It didn't matter who, when, where. This local club, going away to another city for a weekend tournament. That's how it is in the United States. More weekend tournaments where you cram in a bunch of games as opposed to Europe and other places. But it didn't matter who I played, when I played. I just wanted to play. And so in a sense, that was a good thing because I was just enjoying. After work, I would just enjoy playing. But at the same time, the challenge of that was that I really didn't have a great study regimen. I was very just enjoying everything and not really disciplined in many ways. Other than competing in tournaments, I was disciplined in showing up. But as far as when the games were over, analyzing them, studying carefully openings, middle games, end games, I lacked a really serious focus like you would have if you had a coach, or if you were maybe starting with that idea, I want to make this level, and no matter what, I'll do whatever it takes. So I kind of was somewhat haphazard, but at the same time, I did start to buy some books. I didn't really use online other than sometimes playing online blitz, but I really had the sense that I just am enjoying it, and I want to learn, and I want to get better. But what it takes to do that, it was a challenge. What I normally did was afterwards I kept all my score sheets. I would analyze it on my own without a computer or anything, and I would just come up with assessments and understanding. Sometimes I was right on, and I said, this is what I missed, some tactic or some positional idea. Other times I was still confused because I wasn't using a computer, and I was like, I'm not sure, but I'll formulate an idea. And in the end, I analyzed my games very much so. But what I really needed was more of a holistic, from opening to middle game to ending approach. But what I did concentrate on, besides analyzing my game, was the beauty of the game. I studied top grandmaster games from the past. J.R. Capablanca is one of my favorites. That's the book that my dad had gotten me, and and I didn't read until I started in tournaments. And I loved just looking at top player games because I wanted to see how the best players could beat the best players. How does Capablanca beat Alekhine? They're both great players, or Alekhine beat Capablanca. And so I think I learned a lot with that process of study because I wanted it to be fun. And even top grandmasters will say, you really want a regimen that's giving you a sense of enjoyment. You don't want it to be like pulling teeth. At the same time, there is going to be a element of this is kind of dry, this is difficult, and it's not as fun as I would like it to be. But that's how I'm going to get better. So, kind of balancing the two is what I needed to do more of. But I definitely would highlight that. That's principally the way that I improved, just analyzing top games. Because when I looked at a book like that Irvin Chernev book, Capablanca's Best Endgames, which I highly recommend to anyone starting chess, is or if they have already started chess, because the annotations weren't so heavy that I got overwhelmed when one page has reams of annotations, but they were enough that it would highlight the key points, like one player missed this, or this was another possibility. So with that said, definitely I would say that analyzing games was a critical point for my improvement. The other thing is, I said I did play a lot, so I think that did help in the long run. It did help, even though, again, sometimes it led me to just play anyone, anytime. And if you're trying to reach a certain level and you're playing players that, are 500, 600 points below you. And, if I'm 1800, I'm playing 1200s. That 1200 can beat me. I know that for sure. I knew that then. I know that now. Anytime you're playing anyone, anything can happen. But at the same time, you see the younger players, how they reach a certain level quickly. They're not playing usually the class sections, their level. They're playing open sections. So you can be at 2100, which is in FIDE, maybe 2000 or 1950, and they're playing in the open sections against grandmasters. So even if they lose, they're getting experience, and if they happen to draw or win, then clearly they're going to get their rating raised. So that's a challenge. But I love playing so much that I said I'm not going to skip out on a tournament just because I'm trying to protect my rating. And sometimes you win and you do gain ratings regardless. So I think that I would say that's the principal way that in which I improved analyzation.
I want to get to sort of the meat of the conversation. This is one of the main reasons I wanted you on. And I'm just laughing because I love this about you, and I love watching you play for this reason, which is that pretty much 99% of the time, you will never accept a draw offer. And I just want to say, as someone who watches you play, it's like really fascinating. It could be like the driest position, or maybe it's equal, maybe you're even a little bit losing, and you just want to play for a result. But what I always love about it is the look on your opponent's face, especially like if you're about to run out of time or something, and he's just so sure you're going to take it, and you keep playing on. And it's funny because I know you. If it's someone who doesn't know you, I'm like, he's not going to take it. He's not going to take it. And you find a way. But I love that about you. And I want to get into that. But let me just kind of set this up for everybody. So as most of you know, some of you may not if you're beginners, a game can be drawn by agreement. If both players agree to a draw, one player can say, I offer a draw. And if they agree, it's a draw. Now, there's a whole thing with that about short draws, like people will play a few moves and agree to a draw. That's kind of a separate discussion. But as far as rating and the game itself, there's sort of two schools of thought, just to set this up for everyone. One school of thought, and there are titled players and amateur players alike who are on both sides of this, okay? So one side is that knowing when to offer or accept a draw can be very prudent, can be very smart, can give you a lot of rating points over the long term. And admittedly, that's a category I probably fall into. I know Grandmaster John Ems mentions that in his book, The Survival Guide to Competitive Chess. And then on the other side of it, you have people like Rob and many others who feel that you should not take a draw. And many will say that at the amateur level, especially, you should not take a draw. I am Jeremy Silman, who's a big hero of mine. He feels that way. Many others do. And it's a very interesting thing. The psychology of draw offers for me is one of the most fascinating topics. So, Rob, I'm hoping you can enlighten us just with your reasoning and your whole philosophy about, why you don't take draws and why you feel that way and how you remain very persistent and tenacious at the chessboard.
Well, there's a lot to say about it, and definitely it is a topic worth discussing as chess players. And in terms of the mental aspect, the psychology, well, what makes a person do what they do, and what is it that is their motivation? For me, part of it is because I started chess late, that I just found it as just a wonderful game. I almost didn't want the tournament to end and the game to end. I would be, and this, one of the last persons to leave the club. I could watch someone who's just started their first tournament, and I never thought, oh, well, look at their level. Why should I watch that game? I just found anytime they're moving pieces, it's interesting. And I didn't ever think that, well, because it's not a grandmaster game, I shouldn't watch it. I just love the game, and love being around the tournaments. And I also knew that, like, hey, the next day I have to go and work, get up in the morning and, teach history or whatever. I go to the office when I was before I started teaching. So I kind of was wanting the night not to end, or the day not to end, because it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I think that anyone who hasn't played over the board in tournaments, I think it's a great thing to try at least once. And if you play online, it can be enjoyable, but I don't think it's anywhere near the over the board experience. So with that said, I really found that's one of the thinking it through. That's one of the motivations, to just enjoy being around the game. And someone would say, well, is it worth losing just because you want the game not to end? It will end, you'll lose. But no, because I always think that whenever there's pieces on the board, there's possibilities for good moves to be made and bad moves to be made. Some of the most top players have lost positions would say, how could that be? It's no way they can lose this. They're too good to lose this. Well, it can happen. One of the thoughts I had is like drawing from history. Some people have said that in the ancient Mayan civilization, when they had the event of athletic event, the loser would be killed, or the winner would be killed, something like that. And although I'm not certain that that's actually been certified as true, it's more legend, I believe. But still, I would think during the game sometimes, look, what's the worst can happen to me? I'll walk out and I'll lose some rating points. I've lost the game, but that's the worst. I still can say I enjoyed the struggle, the battle. World champion Emmanuel Lasker once said that. It's like, chess is a struggle, and you got to embrace it. And that's what made one of the reasons why he was very successful, because he knew the mental aspect of it, that your opponent could be afraid or doubtful or overconfident or confident. So there's always going to be risk when you sit down and play, that you might lose, but you also might win. So, and if it's a draw, it's a draw. It's a great feeling. Some of the best feelings I've had in a chess game is when I've battled to a draw, but I tried everything, and my opponent, I know, tried everything too, and that it ended up just a draw, and that's okay. That's all right. So, like Mikhail Tal, I think some would say that he was such a dynamic player, perhaps the greatest dynamic player in chess history, and some would say that he would say, I'd rather have one win and one loss and get 1 point than two draws. I'm not sure, if there's something to that some others would know chess history better than I, if he really actually said that, believed that, or did they say that was his attitude? But there's something to that. And in the end, we play for enjoyment. We play to hopefully learn a bit about ourselves, about others, enjoy the time with others. But the battle is something that if one doesn't embrace it, I think they're missing out. Just enjoy it because it's so complicated. I mean, you see if Magnus Carlsen is scratching his head and he's like got his hands in his head, and it's like, means that he's thinking it's hard. Chess is hard. And if someone thinks it's just easy, I was winning, so how did I draw this position? Then I think in some ways they're lacking full understanding of the complexities of the game and the struggle that is part of it.
So Rob, let me just jump in for a second. So if I'm understanding you, it's not so much when you say no to a draw, it's not so much an obsession with winning as it is an obsession with the struggle. Like you just want to complete the struggle, and it's sort of an aesthetic thing to kind of just see it through to the end. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, definitely. It is no question. And I didn't really think it through years ago. But the more, and some people would talk to me and say, hey, you should have taken a draw, or hey, look, some spectators or even my opponents. But they wouldn't come to me and say, generally not, they wouldn't come to me and say, when I won the game, you should have taken the draw. No, because people are looking at the final result. But I understood that all the possibilities were there, win, lose, draw. Like I said, as long as there's pieces on the board and this checkmating material, someone could, win, lose, or draw. So then in the end, yes, it is an accurate assessment that my philosophy or my thinking is that just want to embrace the struggle. It's a wonderful game, and it should be considered that.
Before you get into, I know you have some stories for us. So before you get into that, just sort of as a general answer, when you decline a draw, especially if both players are like, because usually if both players are in severe time pressure and your opponent offers a draw, he's just like, oh, please accept it. When you decline the draw, does it drive your opponents crazy generally? Like, does it mess with their head? Like, do you find, like, what's your general reaction when you say no?
Throughout my time playing all these years, one of the things, and I never really had a personal coach. I had friends like that, maybe I would study a little with, but really didn't have a personal coach. And even if you do have a personal coach, one might disagree with another. So what one coach says, and they could be equally strong players, one might say, no, this is the way to do it, and another say that. So I couldn't afford one. And even if I did, part of me, I appreciated the fact that I started late. So I had something like to try to do what I could, to just be competitive. And so really, it was something I learned over time that when I play, I try to focus on the board and I don't look at my opponent. I just I just see a hand. My head is usually down when I'm, especially if the game is tense and I'm low on time, or he's low on time, or she's low on time. And so what would happen is I got so accustomed to just looking and focusing and just not paying attention to any of their facial expressions, not even looking. Sometimes I'd hear a sigh or so, but really, that was just one of the ways that I learned. Maybe a coach would have told me, "Oh, look at and stare at them," but I didn't really feel like that. And actually, Bobby Fischer had mentioned I just play the board, so I remember hearing that quote. So I play against the pieces, not
play the board, not the man, right?
Yeah, because if I see they're nervous, I didn't want to play. And I do have a story to share because it would only really happen once that I remember ever doing this in a tournament intentionally. But I didn't want to be, how to say, try to play an actor. I'm just looking at the board and I try to find what's the best plan, what's the best move or moves from me and my opponent. So that's why I can't, in a sense, I can't answer that question. I imagine if I had to answer a question, I would say some, yes, some probably were like, well, what's going on? Or what are you thinking? And others probably were like, okay, I just got to play. He's not taking a draw. And when you have kids, a lot of times you get kids who would offer a draw several times, and sometimes they're in completely losing positions, and sometimes the position is either side has a chance. But and that's what something other chess players, top players, have said is, listen, don't expect if they're offering you a draw that it's because they're winning. I don't think generally they're winning and they offer you a draw, unless maybe if they win, they get first place or something like that, which is one of the stories I'll share. But it's really. I wouldn't know for sure. individual players if they were really overall very upset or if maybe it got them more nervous. I would say, if I had to guess, a little bit of everything. Yeah.
So now you have some stories for us, I believe, about draw offers and maybe a few other things. So I'm very curious to hear this. I know we were speaking in sort of the pre-interview phase before I pressed record, and I was like, no, don't tell me. I want to, I kind of want to be surprised like everyone else. So as with all of you listening, this is the first time I'm hearing this, but I love these sort of stories from the tournament scene. Like, this is the stuff you just don't get from playing online. Ready when you are, Rob. Lay it on us.
Oh, sure. Definitely. So, though there's many stories, and if I had more time to think about it, I'd probably come up with many more, but some that stuck in my mind. There was a player, I guess I could name his name, good friend. I haven't seen him in years, but well, we'll just say his name's Scott. A good player, and really was very careful, a thoughtful player. Like, he tried to play everything solid. His openings were like even the Dutch stonewall is black. So he's just trying to make sure everything is. He liked close positions, and he'd be generally okay with a draw. Not saying he loved draws, but he would generally be okay with a draw, especially against a high-rated player. That's his personality. And so we're playing in a tournament locally, and I believe it was that opening, the Dutch Stonewall, and it was a close position, and it was a difficult game. And somehow, even though I was the higher rated player, I said, okay, no, he's fine here. There's no advantage for me at all. And the game is headed toward a draw, especially since a lot of the center pawns are locked up. But it was an end game. I believe it was opposite color bishops. And so what I did was I said, well, opposite color bishops, even sometimes you're down a pawn, you could, many times it's still drawn, right? And so after we played, might have been 80 moves, and at some point we're just shuffling pieces, and I said, well, what's left here? There's just a few pawn pushes. And so, yeah, okay, I'm going to push a pawn, but I'm not sure if it's a chance for him to win once I give up the pawn. For perhaps he'll make an error, and there's going to be some sort of compensation I get for it, but nothing really that I have. But I knew that, okay. But okay, what's the worst going to happen? I can lose. So I push the pawn, and of course he takes it, and he offers a draw. And then after several more moves, because I think we were on move 90 or something at the time, and so I'm looking at it and saying, well, I'm not losing 100% yet unless you play a few more moves, So even though I thought it's very possible I am losing. And so played a few more as I rejected the draw offer. And again, sure enough, it seems like it's like there's not enough progress for him to win. But he's probably, at that point, I didn't ask him afterwards, but he might have liked to draw then too. So at some point I'm saying, well, this isn't looking good. So I'll give a second pawn. I think there were just 2 pawn pushes in the position. So as I'm down 2 pawns now, I don't remember if my king could somehow even get in. So it could have been just giving up 2 pawns with not even my king getting in. And sure enough, as we kept playing, now he starts to make progress, and it's clear that I'm going to lose. And I didn't expect any draw offers from there. And so, like, at that time, I'm playing the last moves out, and I'm thinking in my mind, yeah, I could say I could have taken the draw, and even some would say I should have taken the draw. But somehow it was almost like how would I put it? It was almost like the natural consequence of playing those moves and having that mentality in that particular game, which is that if you go so far, you go too close to the fire, of course, most likely you will get burned. And so afterwards, he said to me, and he's a good friend, he said, Rob, why didn't you take the draw? You should have taken the draw. And I said, I think in this case, it was like, I'd rather lose, and I didn't say it exactly like that, because I didn't want to put him in a situation to you, I'd rather lose than draw. No, I didn't mean it in that way, in disrespect in any way, but it was like a kind of like saying that I wanted to take it as far as it can go. And if you win, you win. And I just shake your hand and move on. But that was a game that, and I don't remember thinking that being distraught, like, oh, how did I lose this game? No, because I knew what I was doing. And it wasn't clear that when I gave the first pawn up that, oh, I'm definitely losing. It was like, then I think I wasn't going to lose, but that there was some semblance that he could make a few errors and lose. But practically speaking, no, he wasn't going to lose or even draw. But that was just a situation where I remember him saying it clearly. Why didn't you take the draw? Like talk about disbelief, like what? But I wish I had the position. If I get the position, I would be happy to show you and look, because I'd be interested myself in finding that particular game. And but that was one. And I thought I would share, start with that, because again, it's like one of those situations where it would seem unreasonable, but yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, there's always some risk involved.
Right, but another time you could have won that, right? Could have gone the other way easily.
Yes, definitely. And then I had a story of this player I had played in the Northeast Open in Connecticut, in Stamford, Connecticut. And this was in 2008. And the other game, I don't remember when it was, but this game was in 2008. And I'll just say his first name was Alex. And it was the last round, 5 rounds. And he was the only one in the section that was 4 out of 4. He had won all 4 games. There was another player. His name was Hannon. He's published some books. So Hannon Russell, his name is familiar. And he had 3.5 out of 4 points. And I also had 3.5 out of 4 points. So the player I was playing, Alex, I had the white pieces. He was, again, all he needed was a draw to assure first place, clear first place, or a tie with Hannon if Hannon would win his game. So, and we didn't know how Hannon was going to do. So maybe he was going to win, get 4.5 out of 5. And so in the game, as I'm the white pieces, it's just I believe a queen pawn Tory attack I played. And it was equal game. He had equalized. It's clear. He was fine. He had made the pawn pushes of breaks, and he was no worse. So at that point, he offers me a draw, and he knows his situation. And looking at the board, in my mind, I remember thinking clearly, like so many other times, there's no way I'm taking a draw. Anything could happen. I'm not worse. I might not be better at this point as far as I analyze the position. But yeah, if I outplay you, I win. If you outplay me, you win. And so usually with draws, it's another thing I normally have done. I don't say yes or no. I don't say I'll think about it. I don't say let me think about it, or some people have ways of saying it. I refuse a draw by making a move, and I accept a draw, of course, by shaking hands and saying good game. So I made a move, and several moves later, I make an error, and I remember making an error, saying, "Okay, so now if he finds this, I'll lose the rook for the knight. That's my best continuation." But my knight's on e5. It's a decent outpost, but I don't have enough compensation. It should be losing. So as soon as he plays the sequence and we play it, he looks at me, and I was looking at him because I think it was his turn. He looks at me and he says, makes his move. He says, I offer you a draw, and this is the last time I'm going to offer you a draw. He said it just like that. And normally, you shouldn't talk to a player like that. I mean, because I believe you shouldn't say anything to anyone except offering a draw,
right?
Or I resign. You shouldn't have conversation with your opponent or so. I didn't get any sense of anger or anything like that he's saying. I didn't take it as like, oh, he's looking down, like, oh, I'm gonna, because I knew his situation. He just wanted a draw to get clear first or tied for first. So as I analyzed the position, as much as I didn't want to take a draw, I realized that it seemed like that's the logical thing to do because there is prize money involved. But I sat there. I don't remember how many minutes I took to make the move, but I sat there thinking all throughout, what can I do? What can I see on the board to justify not taking the draw? So I kept looking. Well, my knight on e5. It's a good knight. It's a good knight, and that's all I really saw. There was nothing, no other attribute that I could say. Oh, I have a major attack on the king. So I refused a draw. And sure enough, a few moves later, I mean, several moves later, he just falls apart. He doesn't play the end game. I believe it was he had two rooks versus rook and knight, and I'm not sure if queens were on the board, but there were a lot of pawns on the board. And he just collapses. Maybe I made a couple of pawn pushes. He didn't react properly. And then I got an attack on his king. Then I think I ended up winning the exchange back and winning the rook and pawn endgame. But just a total collapse. Even for his level, I think he was rated 2000 or something, which is maybe ELO 1900, or if you subtract 100 points from. But he was a decent player. He actually taught chess in Connecticut, and he just collapsed. And afterwards, so I ended up clear first because Hannon drew his game and I won $700. But, the thing was, it wasn't really even about the money. I thought, sure, it's nice to win prize, earn that. But it was really the mental, what I sensed was like, I really pushed hard. And yes, he should have won if he played accurately, but he didn't. And that gave me satisfaction. As much as winning the money was great, of course, but it's that sense that I have nothing really to lose. You can't. Not that he was threatening me with taking the draw. But he said it just like that. He said, "This is the last time I'm going to offer it," because he knew he was in the winning position. And I think my thought was that he wasn't prepared for the struggle afterwards. That the game was still complicated. Just because you have a rook and I have a knight, that doesn't win the game automatically. And if everything gets traded off and you have a rook and I have a knight, theoretically, in many cases, as long as your king's not cornered or the knight is not trapped off, it's a draw, So, that was one story that I remember to this day. It was just, it revealed to me a lot about, just being in some ways courageous, and in other ways it's more not as much courageous, but being persevere, and just being ready to battle and fight.
Well, a couple of things with that. It's interesting. A lot of play. I mean, this. I mean, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of players, a lot of amateurs, they think that the exchange is a foregone conclusion, right? I'm up the exchange, I'm going to win. But like you said, if the minor piece, if you have a bishop or a knight for the exchange, if it's very well placed and your rook really has no open files or isn't attacking anything, it's tough. The exchange is tough. The exchange can be tough, but also the fact that he was so desperate to get the half point and he was obsessed with that was probably all the more reason for you to decline it, because that's where, rather than just say, let me just play the game, because what's the old saying? One of the best ways to lose a game is to play for a draw, right?
Yeah.
He was he just wanted it to end. He was thinking, and I'm sure, like when he said, I offer a draw and this is the last time I'm going to offer it, when you turn that down, that probably caused him to tilt a little bit. And, then you just turned it around. So, a lot of psychology there.
Yeah, I definitely think that's what happened to him. But yes, some have said that as far as draws go, that if you're not willing to push to the end, then in the sense you don't deserve it, because you have to show it. Many people say, well, this day and age, back then I think that was 2008, but before that, before the engines got as strong as they were, people weren't always saying, even kids and all ages saying, well, I put this on Stockfish and, coming back to you the next day, the next week. Oh, and Stockfish said this. Well, easy. Yeah, it's Stockfish could beat Magnus Carlsen, the best player in the world. You don't have Stockfish when you're at the game or Shredder or whatever, so Komodo, all these engines. So it's easy to say that, but in practice, it's not the same. And if, it's clear that if, let's say, Fabiano Caruana had this position that he had against Magnus, and Fabiano offers him a draw when Magnus is down to exchange, even Magnus, I think, in this position would say, maybe rip Fabiano's arm off and say, okay, I'll take it, because at the highest level, as I, think of a position where clearly the technical skills are so high, that the super grandmasters, they know the limit where, no, this you can't keep playing. You have to take the draw. But like you said, the amateur level, anything below grandmaster really or international master is, it's all fair game. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in that position, Magnus keeps playing, but I don't think so. I mean, because chess becomes more and more a certainty when your technical skills are so elevated that certain end games you could play blindfolded, and play accurately or certain positions. But this wasn't one for him, and for me, it was anything could happen, and I knew that. So that's and I've done that even against international masters. It was a game against Jay Bonin where he offered me a draw, and I remember putting on the engine afterwards because I thought I was clearly winning. But when he offered me a draw, it was equal according to the engine. I only looked at that later. And this was in Albany, a tournament, New York State Open, I believe. And so when he offered me a draw, and I was clearly better beforehand, I thought I might have been winning beforehand. But when he offered me a draw, I said, like my mind was thinking, no, I had such a better position before. I'm going to keep playing. And Jay and I, even though he's international master, since he plays at the local club, I've been able to play him a lot through the years. And so I refused a draw. And on the next move, he blundered. He made a bad move, and I knew it was a bad move. And he ended up losing the game. And I knew that, if I had just taken the draw, I would have been like, okay, it's fine to draw. But I would have had that sense like he was in trouble beforehand. And sure enough, maybe I don't know what his mindset was, but at the time, I knew when he offered a draw, he obviously wasn't offering because he was like, happy about thinking he can win. He didn't think he could win. So that stuck in my mind too, because Jay, I know all the times he never offered me a draw when he was winning or when he thought he could win. There's no way. He's a fighter too, and played as much chess as anyone in the world over the years, playing all the time. So so that was just a story. There was another story, if I can share this.
Let me just jump in for 1 second though. What I think is funny is I love the fact that you're declining draw offers even against titled players. Like I think that's awesome. And it seems to me basically it's almost like you're not even factoring the rating. In other words, is that correct? Like
right.
You're just going by the game. Because I think what most of us do is we look at the rating. That's just kind of the default mindset. So if it's a dead even position, if our opponent is rated several points below us, most of us are going to be like, no, I'm not taking a draw because you'll likely blunder. But yet, if your opponent is rated several hundred points higher than you and he offers the draw, I think many of us end up taking it just because those rating points are just, for a lot of people, they're just too nice to turn down. But you're just kind of looking at the board. See, what's interesting about you, Rob, it's not this obsession to win. It's more you're declining them just for the struggle itself, which is kind of a unique perspective, because you would think that if someone says I never take draws, it's because they're just obsessed with getting the point. But it's much deeper and more meaningful for you, which is a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think that it's the beauty of the game. It almost tells me I want to know the truth. I want to know where this leads. If I that's one of my weaknesses too, because sometimes I'm over optimistic. Our friend Brian, who's been on the podcast with you, our good friend, he's I could always learn from him because he's always careful and cautious. He's like, Rob, but what about this? If he just does this, his king is safe and you're down material and you got no compensation. And I'm like, yeah, I would be like, oh, but I want it not to be true, but the truth is the truth. And so that's one of my weaknesses, because at the end of the day, you still have to make wise decisions. You don't want to make foolish decisions and say, "Well, I was brave," and I'm going into the at night, to the most dangerous place in the city, and hoping I don't with money, scotch taped to my body, and think that it's all going to be okay. That's overly optimistic. I don't think I'm going to make it through. But that's one thing that I could say, that it's definitely a matter of aiming for the truth. I want to know if I believe that I can play this position accurately enough. Will it be, what it is? Is it going to be a draw? Because if it's a draw and I play accurately and he plays accurately, shouldn't it be a draw? I mean, and if it's a win for one side and they play accurately, shouldn't that side win no matter what? And so if I think my position is completely lost, that's different. But in the situation, as I shared with you with Scott Demore, I didn't think my position was lost. Even if after I gave the second pawn, I didn't say for sure it was. I thought after the second pawn, there's a good chance it could be, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I said, okay, let's try it. But with the game with Jay, no, there was no way. I thought that I was even equal or better. I knew that. So why would I take the draw? And then this game in against Alex, I knew I was in big trouble, and if he plays accurately, I'm lost. But there's still a lot of pieces on the board, and I took that chance. That was more of a risk than that I always I don't always take those risks, but yeah. And even against there was a player. I haven't gotten a chance to play too many Grandmasters, maybe less than 10, but I played Michael Rode once in the local club, game 30. So it was a quick game, and he was in big trouble. We castled opposite side. He said after the game he had missed something, and I had what looked like a winning attack against his queenside king, and so he offers me a draw, and I said, "There's no way if I play accurately that I shouldn't win, or at least draw anyway, but certainly not lose." And sure enough, when he offered a draw, I didn't follow the correct continuation. And afterwards, you look on a computer and say, "Oh, well, how could I miss it?" Well, no, but it is what it is. He found some retreating move and then consolidated, protected everything, and then he ended up winning. So, I didn't regret it, because I believed that it was not in his hands anymore. If I play accurately, I just didn't find the right continuation. And it wasn't something that I thought was impossible to find. Otherwise, maybe I would have taken a draw. But and another time he did offer me a draw, and I was low on time, and I had sacrificed material, and then I ended up taking it that time because I was so low on time, and I thought the best I had was perpetual that I could see. So,
and if you don't take the draw and you lose, you're not obsessing over it. You're not beating yourself up. Is that correct?
Generally not. There's been times where if there was a prize fund, a big prize fund at stake, then I might think, oh, well, but then those are factors I don't really want to think about, the money involved. I don't want it to be about that, even though it's nice that that's there, the opportunity to earn prize. But at the same time, I really find it that generally not. No, it's like I look at the next game and I say, okay, so I got another opportunity in the next game. And there have been some times, but it's generally been the losses where I've played very badly, blundered in winning positions and just blundered and lost. Those are the ones that I look back and say, oh, what could have been? Or why did I play this move or not see this? As opposed to rejecting draw offers and then losing, because I knew I fought there, as opposed to just a outright blunder where it's like, I didn't even have a chance to, accept or reject a draw offer. So,
all right, Rob, I had jumped in before. You said, correct me if I'm wrong, you have another story you wanted to share with us. Is that correct?
So yeah, I mentioned before about acting, and when you asked me about looking at someone, whether or not they are nervous or they're upset if I refuse a draw offer. But there was a time where I played this player, David. David, it was a Philadelphia Open. So there was, there was like playing for thousands of dollars. First place in each section is thousands of dollars. So there's something at stake. I think we had both won our first two games, and he's I know him because I didn't know him personally, but he's Filipino. So I was like thinking that was before I was married to my wife, who's Filipina, and I knew some Filipinos as friends growing up, and I always knew that they were like not hustlers, but like as far as chess, but like very they're how to say emphatic, emotional. It's good. I like it because it's like they like to. They seem to be enjoying chess, like gusto, like they play with gusto. So I kind of had seen him in the tournaments before, and I knew he was like that type of player, just like he's a fighter. Yeah, definitely. So in a sense, we were similar. And so the position was that I misplayed something from a really good position. And then I saw that he had an opportunity to repeat, to keep checking and force a perpetual. But at that time, I think, we were both doing fine. It was the beginning of the tournament. And so I was looking at the situation and saying, well, he has a perpetual, but if he doesn't take it and keep checking my king, is there something I can do to create some possibilities that one of us, I could win or lose, but it wouldn't be a draw. And so I saw that there was an option, like if he plays this move, okay, because as it was his turn, I was waiting, calculating. If he plays this move and doesn't repeat, I'll play my king over, or I'll play a move that will create some issue where he has to defend a pawn, and then there'll be no perpetual, and I can get out of it, right? But if he does go for perpetual, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. So sure enough, he didn't go for perpetual. But before that, I should go back a bit. Before that, I personally, I let my clock go down, and I put my hands on my head. And not that when I'm playing, my hands wouldn't be on my head, but this time I looked at the clock several times to kind of feign that, oh, look, I'm nervous. My clock is running down, because I knew that if he takes the perpetual, the clock doesn't matter anyway. It's a draw. But as I saw that if he doesn't take the perpetual and goes for the other move, or what I perceived was his only other move, then he would end up not having perpetual and have to defend the pawn, end up, probably losing the pawn, and risky for him, right? So I'm putting my head, my hands, and my hands, my head, and then I play the move so that now all of a sudden, okay, he can take the perpetual, and that's it, or not. But he saw now, apparently I'm nervous. I'm looking at my clock, and I brought my clock down to like, if I remember correctly, like a minute and a half, 2 minutes or so, but there was 5-second time delay, and I knew that. And also I remember that I was doing that also because I realized I had like 5 moves left to make time control, the 40th move. I had just a few moves made. So I knew that it was like, it probably is not going to work. He's going to take the perpetual. And sure enough, he goes for another move, and now I make time control, and he loses the game. And I didn't talk to him afterwards, but it was like, I said, that worked perfectly. That worked brilliantly. And I'm not really an actor or anything, but it was, in a sense, what I thought was the natural thing to do, because again, I saw that after this move, I can make a few moves and time control, and I have an hour, because the second time control was 1 hour with 5-second time delay, and everything would be fine. And even still, if I win the pawn and it's a draw, but I'm gonna make him work for it. And so that was one sense where it was his style to fight, and it was my style to fight, and it turned out the best thing for us, or for him, to do was take the draw, and then I would have had no choice. It would have been repeated checks on the king. So that was kind of a funny thing. I don't think in that tournament I ended up winning any prize fund, but I remember that gave me a satisfying feeling, because at that time, then I was 3 wins out of 3, and then I was like, just I thought that it was something that was worth trying.
I think I'm going to do this for a month. I think for like a month, I'm just going to turn down all draw offers and just see what happens. Because I don't know, you're inspired. I mean, the thing with me, as far as not quickly accepting draws, I'm much better. I used to be like when I was first in tournaments, it was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll take it. Right. Wouldn't even think about it. It was like an instant reaction. But now I'm much more, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to say thoughtful, but kind of like what you do. I try to look at the position. It's kind of what you said before, which I'm trying to do more of, which is, okay, wait a minute. Do you have something to play for? Is it really a draw? Do you have an idea? Because what I'm doing now, the only exception, if my flag is about to fall, that's a different story. If it's a last round tournament, the last round of a tournament, I should say, and it's a much higher rated opponent, I will confess I'm going to be more inclined to take the draw just to end it with like some extra rating points. Probably not the best attitude, but I will concede that. That's kind of my thought process sometimes. But all things being equal, if I'm offered a draw, if I see an idea, like if I'm a little low on time, but I see an idea, I'll keep playing. If I look at it and it's like, I don't know what to do, I can't, I don't see a plan, I don't see a pawn break, I don't see how I can make any progress. And if I push it, then I might turn it down. But very interesting. But I want to follow up with something, Rob. We touched on this a little bit. I want to talk about playing in time pressure. Now, kind of a two-part thing. So the first question, you touched on this a little bit. Does your clock, and assuming you're using a delay, let's say a 5-second or a 10-second delay, how much does the clock affect you accepting or declining a draw? Like let's say there's a 10-second delay and you only have like 8 seconds left. Are you going to take the draw, or is that delay enough for you to keep going if you think there's something to play for?
That's a great question, because really, I think that as a chess player, it's very important to be, obviously we're analytical. That's part of being a chess player, but it's great and very important to be objective, but at the same time, sometimes being subjective is what will bring success in terms of at least winning the game. Meaning that you have to believe. If no one else believes, you say, okay, well, let's see, let's prove it. So part of it is that as far as that goes, the clock is, you could say, it could be your friend, it could be your enemy, but in the end, it's not the pieces. The pieces are the pieces. The board is the board. So as far as I say, especially with time delay, you have 5 seconds or more before you. At least that's how it is. In the U.S., most of these tournaments are like 5-second delay, or in your club, a 10-second delay, which I think is great. But I believe that if you come from the point of view that you still have time on your clock, and that's 10 seconds before your clock starts ticking down. So if you have, even yesterday at the club, I had 13 seconds at the end of the game, and someone asked me afterwards, were you recognizing your clock, how little time you had left? And I said, yeah, I did glance at it once, but once I glanced at it once, then I knew that as long as I make my moves in 10 seconds, 13 seconds is plenty of time, because it was a rook and pawn end game, and I had 2 connected passed pawns, and it was okay. I knew I could win that position playing right properly. But in the end, for me, it's like you have to be objective, but at the same time, you also have to be open to the possibility of being subjective, meaning that is 8 seconds, can you play 10 moves perfectly and with 8 seconds on your clock with time delay? Or can you play it somewhat good or very good or very poorly? Being subjective means that you have to believe that you can play it very well or excellently or perfectly. Because if you're just saying, well, objectively speaking, I think that's little. There's so little time on the clock, I won't be able to play this very well or perfectly. I think that it's almost like cheating yourself out of the possibility that you can do this. You are able to play well. If you don't, then that's when you go home and analyze, why didn't I play this move? Oh, okay, I didn't see that. Maybe I got to work on my tactics, or maybe my end game skills are lacking, or I just have to play some practice blitz games, improve my time pressure. I don't know, but that's something that I believe you have to have subjectivity also, because too many people would just say objectively, oh, that's just too little time. But I think you have to look at both ways. So I would say that overall, it hasn't, throughout my chess playing, hasn't affected me how much time I had, because there was one particular game I remember, even though a draw wasn't offered, but this was also in New York City. He's an international master now. At that point, he was like 22, 2300, a young kid. David Brodsky, very, very polite, nice kid, and probably will make GM soon. And so I remember playing him where it was a queen and pawn ending, and he was going to queen a pawn, but I kept checking, and I had 1 second on my clock for the last, might have been 30 moves, maybe more. But I was hoping to make the 50 move, without pushing a pawn. I think he just had that one pawn on the board, and his queen was behind it. He was one square away from queening, but I kept checking, and I said, "Look, if I end up losing, it's and it was a draw. What can I do? I have no time. It's okay. I'm doing my best, and I know he's not going to offer a draw." So in my mind, I was already thinking, like, it's not about the result of the game. It's simply about just try to play the best move. And if he doesn't, each move, and if he finds the best moves and he has a win, he has a win. And so ended up, I ended up being able to find a way to stop or continue the checks, and ended up drawing position. But it's stuck in my head that I didn't want 1 second on my clock, but I accepted that I have 1 second. And if he had offered a draw, in that case, I would have taken it, because I don't remember, I didn't have any chance to win the queen or, queen a pawn of my own. So I remember, there was no really, how could I win unless he hangs his queen or something, or there was no checkmate, so therefore, it was one of those things that I have in my mind already. I have to be willing to fight to the end. And that's how I take it when I have little time on my clock. Don't worry about it. Just you're not unaware of the clock, but you're also not letting it dominate your decision making.
Yeah, it's like you said before too. If you know what you have to play, if it's just a matter of technique, the 10-second delay is enough. Because Stefan and I were talking last week. We both said both of us aren't that great in time pressure, but I think we were referring to positions where it's still very unclear, a lot of pieces on the board. If I only have like 3 or 4 seconds on my clock and there's a 10-second delay, I'm going to keep going if I know what to do. You know what I'm saying? If yes. To win, if I see the plan, of course. But if I have 3 or 4 seconds on the clock and it's this crazy, wild, like messy, tactical nightmare, and someone offers me a draw, you got to think, all right, it's not my strongest, it is a little bit position dependent, but then if I know, it's like you said before, like the subject, if I know my opponent kind of falls apart even worse than I do in those positions, then, because that's what this game's about. Whoever makes the next to last mistake wins, right?
Oh, yeah. And I would, for myself, say I'm not great at blitz or time pressure. And I have had many heartbreaking losses where my time and like Alakine or whoever, a lot of top players have said, but I believe he's one of them who said that's no excuse, or Nimzovich or so. Time pressure is no excuse. You can't say that. It's like, I think it was Nimzovich, in my system, said it's like it's a criminal. It's a, it's a bad, it's a terrible thing to say, oh, well, because of my time, I never want to make that excuse. If I lose it, I lose because I lost, because you outplayed me, you beat me, and that's it. But I've had some heartbreaking losses because I didn't manage my time properly enough. I let it go too low where I'm winning the position. There was, several situations, big tournaments where, I just didn't handle it properly. Sometimes maybe overconfidence, sometimes nervousness, sometimes just the position is so complicated, sometimes a little bit of everything. But it's okay, because that's like when you start to play, that's part of the game. So you have to embrace that and be prepared for all the possibilities. Because I've also won games where I've had little time on my clock and I just found somehow the proper way to win. But
so, Rob, I want to end with this. I want to talk a little bit about perfectionism. You and I have spoken about this. Perfectionism, for the listeners, that's the idea that you shouldn't always strive for perfect moves. Or perfectionism is, I should say, the belief that you think every move has to be like amazingly perfect or don't play it. And we're sort of hardwired to play that way because all the books, all the instructions always look for the best move, sit on your hands and look for a better one. Like, there's all those, all those sayings, right? Don't make a move unless you can say, what wonderful thing does this do for my position? All that stuff. But the problem is, if you obsess over every move like that, first of all, it's not necessary. And number two, you're going to get in time pressure every single game, especially with the shorter time controls. Like you're doing a game 90 or a game 60, even with the delay in those controls, like you have to make a decision. Like you can't obsess. Do I move rook A to E1 or do I move rook F to E1 or, something like that, right? Do I take back with the bishop or do I take back with the queen? And I mean, yes, you have to look at it tactically, but very, very often the difference is negligible and it really doesn't matter, but you'll waste like 8 minutes deciding that, okay, I'm going to take back with the bishop instead of the queen when it really didn't matter. And guess what? Now you're in this really complicated endgame. That's 8 minutes that you should have used for that rather than, deciding on the recapture. So perfectionism is mentioned in Chess for Tigers, one of my favorites, and the 7 Deadly Chess Sins.
Yes.
Rob, I'm just curious, as a master, is that how you think? Like, do you think I'm just going to look for adequate moves? I'm not going to obsess. Do you sometimes slip into perfectionism? Just wondering how that works for you.
Yeah, that's a big topic because chess, if it's embraced properly, will be understood to be as complicated and rich. You say a game, but in a sense, it's also more than a game because it's patterns, it's things that you have to say, art, say, or science, or a sport. All these things, and that's what Chess for Tigers and 7 Deadly Chess Sins by Jonathan Rosen. If you definitely haven't read those books, definitely those 2 books I highly recommend. As you would, they're great. And Jonathan Rosen also wrote Chess for Zebras. Also, I thought it's very on the psychological aspect. But 7 Deadly Chess Sins is a great book. So so I would say that is a big question for everyone to ask themselves, which is how do I approach playing a game of chess when the clock is ticking and I have decisions to make? When I first started, I was so terrible at managing my clock. I think that there were games where I would play after 10 moves. It might have taken me, depending upon the time control, but I might have taken 40 minutes, 45 minutes for 10 moves or so. And part of it was because I didn't have the background in openings. I was just starting chess, so I really understood like more positional aspects, endings. I've tried to understand, but the openings, patterns, and recognition, I didn't really have much. So that was part of it. But part of it was also because I really was concerned, especially if I played a higher rated player. I was thinking, oh, will I be punished if I play this move? And if I don't see this, will he have something? And then I realized as time went by that oftentimes, a quiet move like A3 on move 5 or something, depending on the opening, it's like, that's theory. That's what the best players play. What? How did that be? Like in the Queen's Indian defense, when you play A3, the Petrosian variation, it's like, what? I didn't know that. And then, I think that's where it's a very, very serious thing to consider as far as if you want to improve on chess and learn chess is how practical decision should you make here, which is again going back to subjective objective, which is if this A3 doesn't lose the game, and even if it's not theory, but it doesn't lose the game, but it's still a position, but it's not the best move. Should you just play it in 5 seconds, or should you just find what is considered the best move? But it might take you 20 minutes. So I think that's something to be said. I find it that as I progressed and I realized that I'm not going to get eaten, alive because I played a seemingly quiet move. It might not have been the best, but I wasn't going to be eaten alive. But I would have more time for later when the position was still complicated and still rich with possibilities, I realized, oh, I'm glad I took less time on those moves. So I would try to play system openings where the Tory attack is the queen pawn opening, the Kali system is white, and any grandmaster would tell you, oh, at some point that's not going to give you a serious advantage, but it's playable. They would maybe show their students some of that. Eventually, you go into the more dynamic, more theoretically deep openings to have a chance to have a big advantage, or bigger advantage is white. But for starters, that's how I approach it. So I try to save time by playing moves that were considered by some passive but acceptable, and so in some ways it wasn't practical, in other ways it was very practical. But I lost some heartbreaking games just because I know that if I had just more time on the clock and not spent so much earlier, then I wouldn't have. But at the same time, then I wondered, I said, but if I hadn't spent as much time, would I have played more inaccurate and been punished for it? So it's kind of like almost like a catch-22. If you do this, you get that. If you do that, you get this. So so it's a serious issue. I think for improvement of chess, you have to be aware of how you handle your decision making, your time, because perfectionism is something that is beyond chess. It could be in everything in life, whether you're cooking a meal or dressing yourself or taking care of your home. You could look at something and say, "Oh, I want it just like that."
So, Rob, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Just a reminder before I sign off. So for everybody, there will not be an episode for the next 2 weeks because, again, it's Christmas Day and New Year's Day, respectively. So our next episode will be on January the 8th. So once again, if you're just discovering us, it's a great binge during your holiday travels. We'll keep you company. We really appreciate you listening. A shout out to our sponsor, Chessable. Check out chessable.com today. Their courses are great. There's a link in the show notes. So happy holidays to all of you. Be safe, be well. I wish you a wonderful 2023. Again, we'll see you on January the 8th. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.